The late afternoon sun, usually a welcome balm on my skin after a long day, felt like a judgmental spotlight that Tuesday. It glinted off the sleek, dark panels adorning my roof, a testament to a decision I'd made with pride and a touch of smug satisfaction. I'd finally done it, embraced the green revolution, basked in the glow of self-sufficiency, and as an added bonus, planned to watch my electricity bills shrink to a whisper. But pride, as they say, often comes before a fall. Or in my case, before a screeching, perfectly coiffed harpy in sensible shoes. My name is Alex Miller. I'm a freelance graphic designer, a creature of habit who enjoys quiet evenings, strong coffee, and the satisfying click of a well-executed design. My little bungalow, nestled in the meticulously manicured Harmony Hills Estates, was my sanctuary. Or at least, it had been. Harmony Hills was a neighborhood where the lawns were always emerald, the azaleas always in bloom, and the rules, enforced with an almost religious fervor by the Homeowners Association, were whispered about in hushed tones, like ancient commandments. I'd done my due diligence, of course. Before I even signed the contract with the solar company, I'd meticulously scoured the HOA bylaws. There was no explicit mention of solar panels. Nothing about roof modifications beyond maintaining the aesthetic uniformity of outward appearance. My panels, a discreet matte black, were designed to blend in, to be almost invisible from the street, unless you were actively craning your neck skyward. I'd even submitted preliminary drawings, a courteous gesture, to the HOA Architectural Review Committee, ARC, a committee I now understood was merely a rubber stamp for the true power brokers of Harmony Hills. That power broker, it turned out, was a woman named Brenda Sterling. Brenda was, in the parlance of Harmony Hills, an original resident. Her house, a sprawling, ostentatious colonial, sat on the highest point of the development, giving her a panoramic view of the meticulously curated landscape. And I now realized with dawning horror, a direct line of sight to my roof. Brenda was the undisputed queen bee of the HOA, a position she wielded with the unwavering conviction of a Roman empress. Her voice, when she spoke at HOA meetings, was a low, resonant hum that could silence a room. Her pronouncements were delivered with an air of absolute authority, as if she were divinely appointed to maintain the pristine, unchanging order of Harmony Hills. I was watering my petunias, the ones I'd painstakingly nurtured from seedlings, when Brenda's pristine white SUV, a vehicle that probably had a custom air freshener, glided to a halt at the curb in front of my house. The driver's side window hummed down, revealing Brenda. Her silver hair pulled back in a severe, immaculate bun. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, fixed on my roof. She wore a crisp linen blouse and a string of pearls that seemed to gleam with an almost predatory luminescence. "Mr. Miller," she began, her voice carrying across the quiet street, each syllable precisely articulated. It wasn't a greeting, it was an accusation. I straightened up, a trowel still in my hand, the scent of damp earth clinging to me. "Mrs. Sterling, good afternoon." She didn't return the pleasantry. Her gaze remained locked on my roof. "I see you've gone ahead with modifications." The word modifications was spat out like a piece of spoiled fruit. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. "Yes, solar panels, for energy efficiency." I tried to keep my tone light, conversational. Brenda let out a soft, disdainful huff. "Energy efficiency? How quaint." "Mr. Miller, those panels are in direct violation of Harmony Hills Estates covenants, conditions, and restrictions." My trowel slipped from my fingers, landing with a soft thud in the mulch. "Violation?" "But..." I checked the bylaws. "There's nothing about solar panels." Her smile was a thin, humorless line. "The bylaws are a living document, Mr. Miller. They are interpreted. And the interpretation is clear. Any addition to the exterior of your home that alters its appearance without explicit prior approval from the ARC is a violation. And those things are certainly altering the appearance. But they're designed to be unobtrusive, I protested, my voice beginning to fray. They're black. They're flush with the roofline. Unobtrusive? She scoffed, her voice rising slightly, drawing the attention of a neighbor watering their equally perfect lawn across the street. Mr. Miller, they are an eyesore. They detract from the aesthetic uniformity of Harmony Hills. They are, in essence, illegal additions. Illegal. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Illegal? On my own roof? The panels were approved by the city, by the county, by the solar company's engineers. They were a symbol of progress, of responsibility. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I submitted plans to the ARC. And as I recall, Brenda said, a smug triumph creeping into her tone, your submission was incomplete, lacking in crucial detail. It was never formally approved. Therefore, you proceeded without authorization, a clear violation. My mind raced. Incomplete? I'd sent them the manufacturer's specs, the installation plan. What more could they possibly need? But the solar company, they handle all the permits and approvals. Brenda waved a dismissive hand. That is between you and the solar company, Mr. Miller. The HOA's purview is the integrity of our community's appearance, and your roof, sir, is now an affront to that integrity. She paused, letting her words sink in. You will be receiving a formal notice of violation, and with it, a fine. The amount will be substantial, and it will accrue daily until the offending panels are removed. The sun, which had felt judgmental moments before, now felt searing, burning a hole through my very being. A fine? Daily? For solar panels? On my own damn roof? The injustice of it, the sheer petty tyranny, washed over me in a hot, angry wave. This wasn't about aesthetic uniformity. This was about control. This was about Brenda Sterling's iron grip on Harmony Hills and her absolute refusal to let anything, not even the sun's free energy, disrupt her carefully constructed world. I looked at my panels, gleaming in the sunlight, and for the first time, they didn't look like symbols of progress. They looked like targets. Brenda Sterling's words hung in the humid afternoon air like a thunderclap, each syllable precisely articulated, each one designed to land with the impact of a hammer blow. A formal violation notice, she'd stated, her voice devoid of warmth, and then the kicker. And a substantial daily fine, until they are removed, of course. The of course was delivered with the smug satisfaction of a Roman empress pronouncing sentence. My solar panels, symbols of my embrace of self-sufficiency and a nod to a more sustainable future, had somehow morphed into offensive blemishes on the meticulously manicured canvas of Harmony Hills. I stood on my porch, the scent of damp earth and blooming azaleas suddenly cloying, a stark contrast to the knot of unease tightening in my stomach. Brenda, the undisputed queen bee of this perfectly coiffed kingdom, had made her decree. Her house, a sprawling colonial on the highest point in the neighborhood, seemed to loom over mine, its panoramic windows no doubt offering her an unobstructed, judgmental spotlight on my transgressions. She'd glided away, her crisp linen blouse immaculate, leaving me to grapple with the dawning horror that my proactive, perfectly legal home improvement had somehow landed me in the crosshairs of petty tyranny. My initial reaction, after the initial shock, was a surge of indignation. I'd done my due diligence. I'd scoured the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC&Rs, with a fine-tooth comb. The document, a tome of seemingly ancient commandments governing everything from fence height to mailbox color, had no explicit mention of solar panels. There were clauses about maintaining aesthetic uniformity and ensuring that additions did not detract from the overall visual harmony of the neighborhood. But my panels were discreet matte black, designed to blend rather than stand out. They were installed on the rear slope of my roof, largely invisible from the street, and certainly not visible from Brenda's ostentatious perch. The fact that my submission to the Architectural Review Committee, ARC, had been a rubber stamp affair, a formality I'd assumed would be as straightforward as choosing a paint color, now felt like a crucial detail I'd overlooked. Brenda, it seemed, was the ARC, the CCNRs, and the Supreme Court of Harmony Hills all rolled into one severe, immaculate bun. I retreated inside, the resonant hum of the refrigerator a small comfort against the rising tide of frustration. I needed to think, to strategize. This wasn't just about aesthetics. This was about control. Brenda viewed Harmony Hills as her personal kingdom, and any deviation from her divinely appointed vision was an affront. My solar panels, symbols of a future she likely saw as inconvenient and potentially disruptive to the established order, had become targets. I spent the next few hours meticulously rereading the entire CCNR's document, my eyes scanning for any loophole, any obscure clause that Brenda might be twisting. I even searched online for HOA regulations regarding solar panel installations, finding plenty of information about state laws that often protected homeowners' rights to install solar. But Harmony Hills, with its iron grip on conformity, felt like a place where such laws were merely suggestions, easily overridden by the will of its self-appointed gatekeeper. The violation notice arrived 2 days later, delivered by a neutral-faced courier who seemed to relish the anonymity of his task. It was a single sheet of official-looking paper, bearing the HOA's crest, a disturbingly cheerful sun beaming down on a row of identical houses. The language was formal, legalistic, and utterly damning. It cited direct violation of Article 4, Section 3B, alterations or additions to exterior of dwelling, and failure to obtain prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee for the installation of non-standard roofing elements. The offending panels were described in stark terms, as if they were radioactive waste rather than integrated technology. The notice concluded with the pronouncement of a $75 daily fine, commencing immediately until the panels were satisfactorily removed. A hot, angry wave washed over me. $75 a day? That was over $2,000 a month. This wasn't a neighborly dispute. This was an economic assault. Brenda was clearly leveraging her power, using the HOA's financial muscle to force my hand. I imagined her, sitting in her opulent home, sipping iced tea, and signing off on the notice with a flourish, her smug satisfaction palpable even across the miles. My initial thought was to lawyer up. I envisioned a protracted legal battle, a David and Goliath scenario where my small bungalow and its solar panels stood against the formidable edifice of HOA bureaucracy and Brenda's unwavering conviction. But the cost of legal fees, the sheer time and emotional energy it would consume, felt overwhelming. I was a freelance graphic designer, not a litigator. My life was built around quiet productivity, not public feuds. I decided on a more direct approach. I would appeal to reason, to the ARC itself. Even though I suspected Brenda was the sole arbiter of its decisions, I drafted a polite but firm response, reiterating that I had reviewed the CCNRs and found no explicit prohibition. I highlighted the discreet nature of the installation and the environmental benefits. I attached photographs, carefully angled to show how the panels were virtually invisible from the street. I even included a copy of my initial submission, which, while brief, had been the standard form I'd seen others use. I sent it via certified mail, a small act of defiance in its own right, ensuring there was a paper trail. The response, when it came, was swift and dismissive. It was a single unsigned paragraph on HOA letterhead, stating that my appeal had been reviewed and denied. The panels, it reiterated, detract from the aesthetic uniformity of the community, and do not meet the standards of the Architectural Review Committee. There was no explanation, no further detail, just a blunt refusal. It was as if they hadn't even read my meticulously crafted argument. A knot of unease began to fray at the edges of my resolve. I was being stonewalled, bullied into submission by a woman who seemed to have nothing better to do than police the appearance of her neighbors' homes. I started noticing Brenda more. I'd see her car, a gleaming Mercedes, parked in front of her house, and I'd imagine her peering through her binoculars, cataloging every perceived infraction in Harmony Hills. Her presence, once a source of mild irritation, now felt like a constant, watchful threat. The fines began to accumulate. I received the first bill 2 weeks after the violation notice, a stark reminder of the escalating cost of my self-sufficiency. The amount was more than my monthly electricity bill had ever been. I paid it, a bitter pill to swallow. But the thought of the fines compounding, of the HOA potentially foreclosing on my home over solar panels, was a chilling prospect. I started to feel like I was living under a microscope. Every time I stepped onto my porch, I'd scan the street, half expecting to see Brenda or one of her enforcers lurking. The once welcome sun now felt like a judgmental spotlight, exposing my defiance to the entire neighborhood. I began to resent the very thing that had brought me here, the promise of a peaceful, orderly community. Harmony Hills was proving to be anything but harmonious. It was a gilded cage, and Brenda Sterling held the key, her grip tightening with every passing day. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was beginning to understand that this wasn't just about solar panels anymore. It was about the very definition of home, and who got to decide what that looked like. The formal denial from the ARC, a single sheet of pristine white paper embossed with the HOA's crest, landed in my mailbox with a thud that echoed the sinking feeling in my gut. It was less a denial and more a pronouncement, delivered with the chilling finality of a papal bull. Your submission, it stated in Brenda's signature precise, almost aggressively legible script, lacks the requisite detail for approval, and as such, the offending panels are in direct violation of Harmony Hills covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Section 4, Paragraph B, Subsection 3, A. Aesthetic uniformity. Please rectify the situation immediately to avoid further penalties. Rectify. Such a sterile, efficient word. It implied a simple fix, a minor adjustment. But Brenda Sterling didn't deal in simple fixes. She dealt in control. And my solar panels, those sleek, discreet, matte black rectangles that were supposed to be symbols of my commitment to both self-sufficiency and a cleaner future, had somehow morphed into a symbol of my defiance, my aesthetic bankruptcy, my very unsuitability for Harmony Hills. The $75 daily fine, already a significant sum, was now a ticking time bomb. I'd scoured the CC&Rs again, my eyes blurring over the legalese, searching for any loophole, any clause that would grant me an ounce of leverage. I'd even consulted a lawyer, a sharp young woman who, after reviewing my documentation and Brenda's rather theatrical correspondence, had offered a weary sigh. "These HOAs," she'd said, her voice tinged with a familiar resignation. "They're designed to be a labyrinth. Brenda here seems to be the undisputed queen bee, and she's made it clear she doesn't want your bees buzzing in her perfectly manicured hive." The legal route, she'd explained, was costly and time-consuming. The HOA, with its deep pockets and its army of rubber-stamped committees, could tie me up in court for years, and in the meantime, the fines would continue to accrue, a relentless tide threatening to drown me. I stood on my porch, the late afternoon sun no longer a welcome balm, but a judgmental spotlight, and stared across the perfectly manicured lawns towards Brenda's sprawling colonial. It sat on the highest point of the neighborhood, a veritable Roman empress surveying her domain. From my vantage point, I could see the glint of sunlight off her pristine windows, the impossibly green grass, the azaleas in their riotous bloom. It was a picture of suburban perfection, a carefully constructed tableau where any deviation, any discordant note, was swiftly and brutally silenced. My bungalow, usually my sanctuary, felt suddenly exposed, vulnerable. The resonant hum of my refrigerator, the quiet whir of my computer, sounds of everyday life, now seemed amplified, like a drumbeat of impending doom. I imagined Brenda Sterling, ensconced in her opulent living room, perhaps sipping iced tea from a crystal goblet, a smug satisfaction on her face as she contemplated the escalating fines. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was actively punishing me for daring to step outside her carefully curated vision of Harmony Hills. The next few days were a blur of mounting anxiety. I'd check my mailbox with a knot of unease tightening in my stomach, half expecting another official-looking envelope, half hoping for a miracle. The fines were piling up, a stark red number on my bank statement that made my freelance design work feel suddenly inadequate. I found myself staring at my computer screen, the cursor blinking impatiently. But my mind was elsewhere, replaying conversations, dissecting Brenda's every word, searching for the crucial detail I'd missed. One evening, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I saw Brenda emerge from her house. She was dressed in a crisp linen blouse and tailored slacks, her severe, immaculate bun a testament to her unwavering commitment to order. She didn't walk. She glided, her gaze sweeping across the neighborhood with that sharp, assessing look I'd come to dread. Her eyes, I knew, would eventually land on my house, on my offending panels. She stopped at the edge of my lawn, her posture radiating an almost predatory luminescence. I felt a hot, angry wave surge through me. This wasn't just about aesthetics anymore. This was about power. It was about the petty tyranny of someone who had appointed herself the arbiter of acceptable living, who wielded her position like a weapon. I walked out to meet her, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Mrs. Sterling," I began, my voice betraying a slight tremor I immediately regretted. She turned, her expression one of polite, yet chilling assessment. "Mr. Miller," she acknowledged, her voice as smooth and unyielding as polished marble. "I trust you have received our notice regarding the unauthorized installation." "I received the denial from the ARC," I corrected, trying to inject a note of calm authority into my voice. "And the notice of fines. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I submitted all the required documentation. My solar panels are discrete, and they meet all the necessary local building codes." Brenda's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Mr. Miller, the CCNRs are not merely suggestions. They are the bedrock of our community's integrity. And while your panels may be discreet to the untrained eye, they are nonetheless a deviation from the established aesthetic. Furthermore," she paused, letting her words hang in the air, "your submission to the ARC was incomplete. You failed to provide the detailed schematic requested in the supplemental guidelines, which are, of course, an integral part of the ARC's purview." "Supplemental guidelines?" I repeated, a flicker of confusion, then dawning horror, spreading through me. I was provided with the standard submission packet. There was no mention of supplemental guidelines for solar panels. Brenda's gaze sharpened, a glint of something fierce in her eyes. "They are, Mr. Miller, posted on the HOA website. It is your responsibility, as a homeowner, to be aware of all governing documents. Ignorance, as they say, is no excuse." I felt a surge of disbelief. The HOA website. I'd visited it, of course, to download forms and read the basic CCNRs. But I hadn't delved into its deepest recesses, hadn't meticulously scoured every subpage and archived document. I had assumed the information provided directly to me was comprehensive. But I wasn't informed of these supplemental guidelines directly, I stammered, the words fumbling out of my mouth. No one from the HOA or the ARC brought them to my attention. Her smile widened, a triumphant, almost cruel expression. Mr. Miller, the HOA communicates through official channels. The website is an official channel. The CC&Rs are a living document, and it is incumbent upon every resident to stay abreast of any amendments or clarifications. Your oversight, I'm afraid, is not our responsibility to rectify. She gestured vaguely towards my roof. Those panels are an affront to the meticulously nurtured uniformity of Harmony Hills. They detract from the perceived value of our homes. And for that, you will continue to be fined until they are removed. She turned then, as if the conversation were concluded, as if she had delivered a final, irrefutable judgment. I watched her glide back towards her own imposing residence, leaving me standing on my lawn, the weight of her words pressing down on me. The supplemental guidelines. It was a textbook HOA maneuver, a classic case of burying crucial information in an obscure corner of their digital kingdom, then using that obscurity as leverage. It was a trap, and I had walked right into it, blinded by my own misplaced sense of due diligence. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, distorted shadows across the manicured lawns. The quiet hum of the neighborhood seemed to mock me, a symphony of conformity that excluded me entirely. I looked at my house, at the panels that represented my attempt at progress, at my commitment to a sustainable future. Now, they were just symbols of my hubris, my naivete, my utter defeat in the face of Brenda Sterling's iron grip. The fines would continue to accrue, a constant gnawing reminder of my failure. I was trapped, not by my own making, but by the very system designed to maintain a facade of peaceful coexistence. And in that moment, staring at the darkening sky, I understood that this battle was far from over. It had only just begun. The formal denial of my appeal landed in my mailbox like a lead weight, a stark white envelope with the HOA's ubiquitous, self-important crest embossed in navy blue. Inside, the text was as sterile and unyielding as Brenda Sterling's gaze. Regarding your appeal, it stated, the Architectural Review Committee, in conjunction with the Board of Directors, has reviewed your submission and supporting documentation. It has been determined that your solar panel installation, as it currently exists, constitutes a direct violation of Harmony Hills Estates covenants, conditions, and restrictions, specifically Article 7th, Section 3B, pertaining to unauthorized exterior modifications detrimental to aesthetic uniformity. As such, your appeal is denied. The daily fine of $50, as previously communicated, will continue to accrue until such time as the offending panels are removed or brought into full compliance with all relevant HOA guidelines, including the supplemental guidelines for renewable energy installations recently added to the community website. Recently added. The words burned. Supplemental guidelines, a phrase so innocuous, so utterly devoid of menace on its own. Yet in Brenda's hands, it was a weapon of mass destruction. I reread the sentence, my jaw tightening. I had scoured the HOA website before my installation, meticulously reviewing every document I could find. I'd even printed out the relevant sections of the CC&Rs, highlighting the parts about ARC approval and material specifications, but these supplemental guidelines had appeared, like a phantom menace, only after my panels were already bolted to my roof, basking in the sun I was trying to harness. It was a classic bait and switch, a bureaucratic sleight of hand designed to ensnare the unwary. And I, in my earnest pursuit of self-sufficiency and a lower electricity bill, had been caught hook, line, and sinker. The daily fines were already adding up, a constant gnawing reminder of Brenda's unwavering conviction, and the HOA's iron grip. $50 a day. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle. It was the sheer, unadulterated pettiness of it all. These weren't ostentatious, garish panels that screamed for attention. They were sleek, discreet matte black units, designed to blend seamlessly with my roof tiles. They were, I'd thought, a symbol of modern living, a quiet nod to environmental responsibility. But to Brenda, they were an affront, a blight on the meticulously curated canvas of Harmony Hills. I paced my living room, the afternoon sun, usually a welcome balm, now feeling like a judgmental spotlight. My bungalow, typically a sanctuary of quiet order, felt like a battleground. The resonant hum of my new refrigerator, powered by the very sun Brenda so despised, seemed to mock me. I had done my due diligence, or so I thought. I had submitted the required paperwork, waited for approval, which had come through, albeit with a vague nod to the existing CC&Rs, not these phantom supplemental guidelines, and then proceeded with the installation by a reputable, licensed contractor. Where was the justice in this? My mind kept returning to Brenda. She was the undisputed queen bee of Harmony Hills, a woman who seemed to have been born with a clipboard in one hand and a stern expression etched onto her face. Her colonial house, perched on the highest point of the neighborhood, offered a panoramic view of the perfectly manicured lawns and identical beige houses that stretched out below. From her elevated vantage point, she could survey her domain, ensuring that every azalea bush was precisely the right shade of pink. Every mailbox stood at a uniform angle, and no rogue solar panel dared to disrupt the sacred aesthetic uniformity. She was, in her own mind, a guardian of tradition, a bulwark against the encroaching tide of modernity that threatened to tarnish the pristine image of Harmony Hills. I imagined her in her immaculate home, surrounded by antique furniture and porcelain figurines, her severe, immaculate bun a testament to her unwavering control. She probably viewed my solar panels not just as a violation of the rules, but as a personal insult, a symbol of my refusal to conform to her vision of suburban perfection. I pictured her, perhaps with a disdainful huff, peering through her binoculars, her sharp and assessing eyes zeroing in on my roof, identifying the offending panels as a direct violation of her carefully constructed world. The daily fines were a tangible manifestation of her power, a constant pressure designed to break me. I could feel a knot of unease tightening in my stomach every time I thought about it. I was a freelance graphic designer. My income, while steady, wasn't limitless. A daily fine of $50 could and would cripple me financially if this dragged on. And Brenda Sterling, I suspected, had no intention of letting this drag on. She wanted those panels gone, or at least, she wanted me to think she wanted them gone, and to make me pay dearly for the inconvenience of even considering them. I needed to fight this. But how? The HOA was a labyrinth of rules and regulations, a bureaucracy designed to overwhelm and exhaust any dissenter. My appeal had been a shot in the dark, a Hail Mary pass, and it had fallen woefully short. I'd paid the fine so far, a bitter pill to swallow, each payment a small concession to Brenda's petty tyranny. But I couldn't keep doing it indefinitely. My gaze drifted to the window, to the sky. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across my lawn. It was a powerful force, a source of clean energy, a symbol of progress. And Brenda Sterling, the self-appointed empress of Harmony Hills, was trying to deny its very existence on my roof. It was absurd. It was infuriating. I grabbed my laptop, a surge of defiant energy coursing through me. I needed to understand these supplemental guidelines. I needed to find a loophole, a crack in Brenda's armor. I navigated to the HOA website, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I found the section on architectural guidelines, and then, buried deep within a subfolder labeled Important Updates, I found it. Supplemental Guidelines for Renewable Energy Installations. I clicked, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and grim determination. The document was short, only 2 pages, and written in that same precise, legalistic jargon that characterized all HOA communications. It detailed specific requirements for the placement, appearance, and even the brand of solar panels, should an homeowner choose to install them. It was clear that my contractor, bless his well-meaning soul, had not been privy to this particular set of ancient commandments. But as I read, a flicker of hope ignited. The guidelines, while strict, did outline a process for pre-approval of specific models and configurations. It also mentioned a provision for historical architectural harmony, which seemed to imply that if the panels were truly unobtrusive, exceptions could be made. Unobtrusive, that was my argument. My panels were unobtrusive. They did blend. Then I saw it, a phrase tucked away in a dense paragraph about material specifications. All renewable energy installations must be submitted for review and approval by the Architectural Review Committee prior to any site work or installation commencing. Failure to obtain formal ARC approval for specific pre-approved product lines will result in the installation being deemed unauthorized and subject to immediate remediation and fines. Pre-approved product lines. That was the kicker. Brenda hadn't just added supplemental guidelines. She had, in essence, created a blacklist of approved solar panels, ensuring that anyone who hadn't navigated this obscure digital labyrinth would be penalized. It was a carefully constructed trap, designed to catch exactly people like me. But there was another clause, a subtle yet crucial detail that Brenda, in her haste to impose her will, might have overlooked. It stated that decisions made by the ARC could be appealed directly to the HOA board, and in cases of significant financial hardship, the board had the authority to grant a temporary waiver of fines pending a final review. A temporary waiver. It wasn't a victory, not by a long shot, but it was a reprieve. It was a chance to buy myself more time, to gather my thoughts, to perhaps even find some allies in this battle. Because I was beginning to realize that this wasn't just about my solar panels anymore. It was about the suffocating conformity of Harmony Hills, about the abuse of power by a self-appointed gatekeeper, and about the right of a homeowner to make sensible, modern improvements to their own property without being subjected to petty tyranny. I took a deep breath, the knot of unease in my stomach loosening just a fraction. The sun had finally dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in hues of orange and deep purple. It was a beautiful sight, a reminder of the natural forces that Brenda Sterling couldn't control. I opened my email, my fingers poised over the keyboard, ready to draft a new appeal. This time armed with a deeper understanding of the rules and a simmering resolve that had been forged in the fires of Brenda's bureaucratic onslaught. The fight was far from over. It was just beginning. The phrase supplemental guidelines landed like a lead weight in my gut, a palpable heaviness that spoke volumes of Brenda Sterling's smug satisfaction. It was a phrase that had burrowed its way into my consciousness, a persistent thorn in my side, and its discovery had been a trial in itself. I'd spent the better part of an afternoon, a good 4 hours of increasingly frustrating digital archaeology, scouring the Harmony Hills Homeowners Association website. This wasn't just a website, it was a digital labyrinth, a meticulously crafted maze designed, I was utterly convinced, by a sadist with a profound appreciation for passive aggression. It was a relic of a bygone internet era, a clunky, unwieldy beast that seemed to actively resist navigation. Its design was outdated, its information often stale, and its links felt deliberately obscure, as if to deter any but the most persistent or the most desperate. And there it was, hidden away, buried under a submenu of homeowner resources, a PDF file titled, with an exquisite and almost cruel irony, Aesthetic Harmony, Supplemental Guidelines for Exterior Modifications. My fingers, betraying a slight tremor of apprehension, clicked it open. The document itself was deceptively sparse, a mere handful of pages filled with dense, almost impenetrable legalese. Interspersed were blurry photographs, grainy snapshots that appeared to showcase acceptable landscaping choices, or perhaps, more accurately, what the HOA deemed unacceptable. The language was a carefully constructed edifice of platitudes. Phrases like preserving the architectural integrity and maintaining the visual continuity of Harmony Hills Estates were repeated like mantras. Then, on page 3, nestled between a rather lengthy paragraph detailing the acceptable heights for fences, apparently anything over 4 feet was an aesthetic abomination, and another equally tedious discourse on the proper shade of beige for exterior trim, a shade so specific it likely required a Pantone chart and a certified colorist to identify, was a section that made my blood run cold. It was titled, with chilling understatement, Energy Generation Systems. This section, a mere whisper in the grand, booming pronouncements of aesthetic uniformity that characterized Harmony Hills, stated with stark clarity, any installation of solar panels or other energy generation devices requires specific approval from the Architectural Review Committee, even if not explicitly prohibited by existing covenants. A detailed site plan, including panel placement, material specifications, and manufacturer's documentation, must be submitted along with a sworn affidavit attesting to the discretion of the installation and its minimal visual impact. Failure to adhere to these supplemental guidelines will be considered a direct violation and subject to fines as outlined in Article 7 of the Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. It was a textbook example, a perfect illustration, of the HOA's insidious operating procedure. Craft a broad, seemingly innocuous set of rules that govern the general upkeep and appearance of the neighborhood, then bury the crucial, the deal-breaking, details in an obscure addendum, a hidden digital commandment that only the truly obsessed, the truly dedicated, or, as in my case, the truly wronged, would ever be motivated enough to unearth. I was confident I had done my due diligence. I had meticulously scoured the main CC&Rs, the hefty binder of rules and regulations that were handed out at closing, the ones that were readily available on the HOA website, the ones that were practically etched into the foundation of Harmony Hills. Nowhere in those primary documents, those foundational texts of our suburban kingdom, had I seen any mention of supplemental guidelines. Furthermore, the initial ARC submission form, a rubber-stamped formality that had felt more like a polite suggestion than a binding requirement, certainly hadn't prompted me to look for hidden digital commandments or obscure appendices. It had been a cursory review, a check-the-box exercise, and the panels had been approved, or so I thought. The affidavit, that was the real kicker. A sworn statement that the panels would be discreet and have minimal visual impact. Mine were discreet. They were the sleek, matte black, low-profile kind, specifically engineered to blend seamlessly with the roofline. They weren't ostentatious arrays of shiny, reflective blue squares that screamed, "Look at me, I'm saving the planet." They were sophisticated, a quiet testament to my commitment to self-sufficiency and a cleaner future. And they were, in my humble opinion, practically invisible from the street. From the curb, one would have to crane their neck and actively search to even catch a glimpse. But Brenda Sterling, the undisputed queen bee of Harmony Hills, a woman whose dominion extended to the precise angle of garden gnome placement, clearly operated with a vastly different definition of minimal visual impact. Her vision, I suspected, involved a panoramic, uninterrupted vista of perfectly manicured lawn not a single solar panel daring to break the meticulously crafted horizon. A knot of unease, a tight coil of dread, began to fray the edges of my pride. I reread the supplemental guidelines, then the CC&Rs again, my eyes darting across the pages, desperately scanning for any loophole, any ambiguity I could possibly exploit. The fines were accumulating with alarming speed. They were more than just monetary penalties. They were an insult, a financial punishment for daring to embrace progress, for daring to make a conscious choice about my own energy consumption on my own property. Each 50-holiday penalty felt like a tiny, sharp jab, a constant nagging reminder of Brenda's iron grip on this meticulously constructed and increasingly suffocating suburban world. I recalled an email I'd received from the HOA board a few days prior, a curt, impersonal message that had arrived like a death knell after my latest and most impassioned appeal had been summarily rejected. It had mentioned the possibility of a temporary waiver of fines, pending a final review by the full board, but only if I could demonstrate extraordinary circumstances and a genuine commitment to resolving the violation. At the time, it had felt like a small concession, a tiny crack in Brenda's seemingly impenetrable armor. But I was wary. It reeked of a trap, a bureaucratic delay tactic designed to wear me down, to drain my resources and my will. Still, it was my only remaining avenue besides a full-blown legal battle, a path that, frankly, I couldn't afford, financially or emotionally. My strategy had to be precise, calculated. I needed to present myself to the board not as a defiant rebel, a troublemaker, but as a reasonable, responsible homeowner who had, through an unfortunate oversight, an accidental misstep, inadvertently stumbled afoul of a newly unearthed rule. I had to make them see that the violation was a genuine mistake, a product of ignorance, not a deliberate act of rebellion against Brenda's meticulously maintained reign. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. It was held, as all such gatherings were, in the community clubhouse, a sterile beige building that perpetually smelled faintly of stale coffee and an almost palpable sense of quiet desperation. I decided to attend. I would be armed with a printed copy of the supplemental guidelines, my original ARC submission form, and a carefully crafted speech, a verbal, carefully constructed edifice designed to aim for polite deference rather than righteous indignation. My goal was to disarm, not to provoke. On Tuesday evening, I arrived at the clubhouse a few minutes early, the crisp autumn air doing little to quell the knot of anxiety in my stomach. The room was already buzzing with the low murmur of conversation, the polite greetings and hushed discussions of the neighborhood's elite. Brenda Sterling sat at the head of a long, polished table, her posture ramrod straight, a testament to her unwavering control. Her severe, immaculately sculpted bun was a crown of authority, her expression a mask of cool, detached efficiency. She was flanked by a few other board members, faces I recognized from neighborhood barbecues, from the occasional terse exchange at the community mailboxes. They all seemed to defer to Brenda, their eyes occasionally flicking towards her, seeking a cue, an unspoken directive. She was the undisputed queen bee, and they were her loyal, if somewhat nervous, subjects. As I took a seat in one of the uncomfortable molded plastic chairs that seemed designed for maximum discomfort, I felt a familiar sense of dread wash over me, a cold wave that was tinged with a simmering, suppressed anger. Brenda's gaze swept over the room, her eyes, sharp and unnervingly assessing, landing on me for a fraction of a second, before moving on, as if dismissing a minor imperfection in the wallpaper. There was no recognition, no acknowledgement, just a cold, impersonal appraisal. It was as if I were just another piece of property, a potential problem to be managed, a variable to be accounted for. The meeting commenced with the usual formalities, a ritualistic procession of agenda items, approval of the previous meeting's minutes, a report on the landscaping budget, which predictably always seemed to be in surplus, a testament to the HOA's vigilant cost-cutting measures that translated to fewer flower beds and a rather monotonous display of green lawn, and an update on the upcoming summer block party. Each item was discussed with an almost religious fervor for order, for fiscal responsibility, for the smooth, uninterrupted functioning of Harmony Hills. Then Brenda cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the polite drone of neighborhood bureaucracy. "We move now to new business," she announced, her tone crisp, precise, and utterly devoid of warmth. Specifically, homeowner Alex Miller of 14 Cherry Lane, regarding a violation of supplemental guidelines for exterior modifications. A profound hush fell over the room. All eyes, like a flock of startled birds, turned to me. Brenda's gaze, now fixed and unwavering, held a predatory luminescence. She knew I was here. She knew I was cornered. And I suspected with a chilling certainty she was relishing every single moment of it. I took a deep, steadying breath, the scent of stale coffee suddenly cloying, suffocating. This was it. The moment of truth. I had to tread carefully, with the precision of a bomb defusal expert, or I would find myself drowning in a sea of petty tyranny and endless fines. The air in the clubhouse thickened with unspoken accusations and the faint, cloying scent of stale coffee. Brenda Sterling, seated at the head of the table, was a portrait of serene authority,